coming right there.
All right, hey gents, welcome back to Tactical Rifleman. Those of you that know me, you know I've had the pleasure of knowing and being friends with a lot of my personal heroes, Randy Rawhide Worst, guys like that. With us today, we have retired Command Sergeant Major Rick Lamb. Again, I consider this guy not just a friend and a brother, but I also consider him one of my personal heroes. But because he retired as a Sergeant Major, I retired as a Sergeant Major. We've seen a lot of uniform changes and just things that certain people in the military lose their minds about. Why are you rolling your sleeves? Why are you cutting pockets off of your uniform and moving them? And a lot of it's because of necessity of the soldiers on the battlefield. And but it's always been that way. So what I realize is this fine gentleman here has got a collection of literally the generations of what our warfighters have used. And this video, I'm gonna give you a slight taste of that fine history, and it's gonna be awesome. Rick, again, pleasure to have you here, brother. Really, without a doubt. Yeah. I'm sincere when I say you're one of my heroes. This is right out of a museum here. I'm not saying you are. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
But you wouldn't be far off.
What do we have here? This is not just before my time. This is pre-World War II. What do we have here?
Correct. This is I've been collecting since I was 8 years old, and the first piece of my collection was my grandfather's helmet from World War I. And so I used to play Army with this in the backyard. And this was the first piece of kit. Now I've since replaced the inside with a different, because it just fell apart. Yeah. But but I'm by no means an expert. I'm just a nut that likes to collect old stuff. A lot of this stuff on the table is reproduction because my real stuff doesn't travel well anymore. Yes. I have his protective mask, but you can't take it out of the case because it's just over 100 years old. Yeah. And so a lot of this is reproduction, but what I'd started noticing over the years as collecting this stuff is that there's patterns. And we go through the patterns and we go through the patterns. We always tend to fight the next war with the kit and equipment from the last one. And that's why it's so important to look ahead, but then also look back to history as well. And I noticed that when we're at war, we first go to war, we take a face shot, because we're fighting the tactics, techniques, procedure from the last one. And then we innovate, and then it goes up, and you can see the stuff plateau when we're at peacetime, and then we take a face shot, and it goes up again. So it's always this stair step. So this is dated about 1960. Now what's significant about 1916 is that we were in wool. And so we go in on the Mexican punitive expedition, and guys are dropping out, right? So they came up with cotton. So they go to cotton because we're post the War of 1898, yeah. The Spanish-American War. We're now in the Philippines, we're down in Latin America, we're in Cuba, and the wool was just not cutting it, so they went with cotton.
Now, take us through everything here, because I see the old wool rolls for the legs. So take us through top to bottom. Let our audience out here see. Guys, literally, he's got foot gear to the top of the head. This is awesome. This really is.
So we... in 1916, Mexican punitive expedition. This is I think the 1910, 1912 Montana Peacat, yeah. And that was the standard issue for a doughboy. Yeah. And so as we got into Mexico, a lot of dust. I mean, they didn't have issue goggles at the time, so you'd pretty much scramble for whatever goggle you could get. These are some old railroad goggles, and this is the headgear that they would wear. Now we went to Europe, 1917, 1918. We wore these Montana Peacats, but again, the Montana Peacat, you can't, where do you put it? The helmets were just coming in. The French actually were the first to use them. The Brits came up with this one, the Brody helmet, and then we copied it later. So, okay. So we got rid of the Montana Peacat. That was the first overseas cap, which we'll see in later videos. Okay. And this was the first helmet. The uniform stayed the same, but again, we went back to wool. So we went from cotton. One thing about the older uniforms is it was you had an inner shirt that was generally it was either wool. This one here is wool, or a light cotton. And It's had a 3-button top,
Yeah.
so it was a pullover.
Yeah.
And we kept this style, I think, right up until the early or late 30s, about 1938. I think is when we went to an actual shirt that buttoned all the way down. But I mean, imagine going into combat with this underneath, and then you had either this
wool shirt over the top.
exactly,
of it,
a wool jacket over the top.
The Mexican border.
And you're exactly. Now we had bloomers back in the day, so the old riding trousers, and it was a good cut. I mean, not a lot of function in it though. You've got the wide. So that was one of the things that they made after the war. Was they started tailoring them more, tighter to the leg.
Okay.
And we initially wore the old school leggings, and a marching shoe. So this was like the 1904 marching shoe. So we went into combat with this
Much.
and this,
Yeah.
and that was the leggings. Now when we got into the trenches in France, we went to puttees, and these are wool puttees, and it's you just wrap it, and this one here is about, well, you can see how long it is. It's like 9 foot, right? And you would just start at the top of the boot, and you'd wrap it all the way around your leg, and it would come up to about your knee,
Okay.
and then you'd tie it and tuck it.
All right, now refresh my memory. Why would I need 12 feet of 6-inch wide wool cloth?
Because when you're in the trenches in France,
Yeah.
and you're wearing these over your boots,
With mud that comes up
were
the hill.
shoes,
Yeah.
exactly. The mud gets into this, which goes right down into your boot, and they fill up with mud, and the guys can't move. So I mean, it was horrendous conditions over there.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of the plates, the glass plates that they would use to shoot, photography with,
Yeah.
were destroyed. They didn't let them get back to the States, so because we were late coming into the war, they wanted us to be there so they could win it. We were fresh manpower,
Yeah.
coming in, so we had the Germans on the ropes, and they didn't want the American people to look at that and say, "Bring them home, get them out of there." We knew we shouldn't have sent them, and so none of the pictures got back, and so consequently they didn't know how bad it was. So they went from the leggings to these puttees, and you wrap them. You start at the top of the
Okay.
boot, basically, and so that the mud can't get in, and then you just do successive wraps all the way around
So
your calf.
any mud,
up to your
rain,
knee.
anything runs down on
Exactly.
the outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
You wrap it from the top of the
Yep.
boot up to above the
Correct.
knee?
Just below the knee. Yep.
Okay.
And then you tie it off, and pretty much that is what they stayed with this through the end of World War I.
Yeah.
And went back to the actual leggings, a different type in World War II.
We are going to get to those.
We were going to get to
different
those later.
tables.
Now,
Yeah.
this kit that you see here, the pistol belt, came out in 1910. This was the pea green model that they initially issued. It went to kind of we would call it coyote tan today,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
an OG olive drab OD number 3. The canteens, which again were still in
And yeah, it just doesn't change. It
standard
really
one
doesn't.
quart. They went from metal to plastic. They changed the cap a little bit, but this one here I think is actually dated 1918. But in 1910 is when they kind of redid all the web gear, and that's the 1911 pistol. Again, back from in 1898 we went into the Philippines.
Yeah.
We're fighting Moro Indians, and they would actually tie tourniquets. So the little 38 pistol that we had was not dropping them.
Yeah.
And so they went to they got the 45 caliber automatic Colt pistol.
Nice and slow bullet.
Exactly, about as big as your thumb.
Pushing a golf ball through you. Yeah.
And
Beautiful thing.
they went to the Chicago stockyards and they fired this weapon, and at slabs of meat to see if they could break bone. They also went to and fired it against cadavers, and they said this is now the gun of choice. I mean, we first had these when we
I came in the
Yep,
Army, that's
exactly.
what we were using. And
So this was one of the longest running sidearms that in our military history. Standard leather holster. This one here is actually a cavalry model, so it
got the flap to keep the gun clean. And
fits a little lower on the leg,
Yeah.
and so it and actually for getting on and off
Moving
of
the leg,
horses. And but this, this leather again, took us a few years. When I first came in, this was no longer brown; it was black. And then we finally went to, I think in the '80s is when we finally changed.
The green Bianchi holster,
the green Bianchi holster,
one, still with the flap.
Exactly, still with the flap.
We're dating ourselves here.
Oh yeah. And so as I start collecting this kit, you also get the weapon that goes along with it. And then, so there for a while, I would actually get into the uniforms, kit up in all the gear, and then actually run some drills, whether it was a magazine change or a transition to your backup weapon. And it gives you a whole new respect for a guy that's got a bolt-action rifle that has to transition to his pistol, or that Thompson submachine gun. I mean, there's no slings like we hang today. Push off to the side and go to a backup that's readily available. You got to actually either hold it, drop it, and then you've got a two-hander for the flap holster, and it gives you a whole new respect for those guys.
Crazy.
And walking through the mud with this type of
slick soles, leather slick soles.
But we changed a lot in right after World War I, and that got us into World War II. Probably the next big change was the late 30s.
All right, so before we get to the next change, we're going to let YouTube slap us right in the face with a commercial. We'll see you guys after that. All right, welcome back from that commercial. Hey, we have fast forwarded to, what's the year?
1941.
1941. This is like, we're still old school, but we're starting to get to like places I've been. All right, so let's, where you want to start?
You're going to hold that, right?
Please.
Yeah, please.
Can I? This is like...
So we get in 1941, late 30s, Europe's on fire. And we know that sooner or later we're going to be involved in it. So they start the late 30s, we start seeing improvements on the kit. We're still in wool primarily, we're still in cotton. The Brody helmet that we saw in the 1916 video is still an issue item. And so we actually go from the Brody helmet to the M1. And the M1 was it's actually a two
inner and outer helmet.
Yep, you got an inner shell and then an outer shell. And the inner shell is, I guess, an early kind of resin, cardboard-like.
You don't want to call it plastic because we didn't have plastic back then.
It was
really wasn't invented
plastic.
Yeah.
And but the nice thing about this is you could separate them in two.
Yeah.
And the guys would wash and shave in the steel pot part.
Yeah.
Still have some limited protection.
That in basic training. Wow, we are old. We are old.
But this helmet got us all the way through Vietnam and into the early days when we first came in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I think we came we finally went to the Kevlar helmet as we know it.
Yeah.
I mean, the first gen.
First generation.
Probably the late 80s, I would think.
85. And, I still had that in basic. When I got to my first unit, we had the Kevlar. Sorry, not meaning to get you sidetracked. Back to World War II.
Oh no, I could talk this shit all day.
I know. Me too. This is awesome.
So the M1 now, some of the innovations is they put a net over the top. Obviously, you could add camouflage and foliage. They didn't have some of the things we have today. So this is an old inner tube. And from a Jeep.
Really?
So they would take a Jeep inner tube and put that over that. So again, you could put more camouflage in there, and it kind of keeps the net tight on it.
Yeah.
And but this the paratrooper model, so it's actually got a chin strap, and then it's also got a neck strap as well to keep it on your head. Now remember what we were talking about, the big Montana Peacat.
Yeah,
okay, when they got into World War I, they didn't know where to put the Montana Peacat, so they came up with these overseas caps. And so this is similar to the one that they had in World War I, but they changed it a little bit for World War II. So this was your overseas cap. And we kept these until until we swapped to the beret in the 90s.
Yeah, literally.
And they were green, I think, when we reissued them. But so you'd always have your overseas cap. This is what the 1st Ranger Battalion would have worn. So it's a standard kit. It's you've got. Again, if you don't have the leather holster, like this is a setup for a rifleman, but he was able to find him a pistol with a
shoulder holster,
a little shoulder holster. Very rudimentary, just goes over your head.
And then that clips around his
on the belt loop, and then allows you to get to it. So again, you see the M1911, the pistol that would that would take us into the 90s, basically.
Yeah, literally.
And so this is, you'll see this throughout our history.
And the history really does repeat itself. You'll see guys throughout the different generations, literally with cross-draw holsters for their pistols on their body armor.
True.
Right? The history does repeat itself. It really does.
And again, it's like the one thing too is the innovators. The Rangers, the Airborne guys. They were the guys that would take it kind of to the next level. And again, combat, because combat forced them to do that. You see the old marching shoe.
Same boots.
Same boots. And you'd get these marching shoes. We also kind of came with a leather out version that started popping up in the early 40s. But generally, this is what the boys would march to war in. Now the Rangers, they took the standard legging, which we'll see in successive videos, and they actually cut it down.
Okay.
And so they cut it down to where you've got about a 10-inch top, and that kind of stayed the standard, the 10-inch top on your boot. Went from about 12 inches to the 10 inches. And the Rangers really like this, so they would cut it down. You see a lot of these are repros here, but so they're nicely sewn. But some you'll see where they just chopped it off, and because to get it a little bit lower on their calf. And so this was that was the standard legging that the Rangers would have worn. And you had this. This was integrated, right? So a lot of times you'll see the old World War II videos, and you'll see the guy, he's either in his pistol belt or he's got
the whole thing.
Got the whole thing on. So this was all integrated. So if you were not wearing the pack,
you weren't wearing
you were wearing a pistol belt.
That's
exactly. Because you can see where the shoulder straps hook into the web belt, his rifle belt, and this was kind of an awkward design. I mean, you'd have your bayonet here on the side for the M1, and this is the cut down version. The one they used in World War I
was a
lot longer. Yeah. So they cut this one down, and this one's actually an original. So goes with that rifle. But you could either wear it on your belt, or you could wear it here on the pack. And when the guys went into when the Rangers from 2nd and 5th Ranger Battalion went in, they pretty much wore this rig. They had a little compass pouch here, and to show you how important the compass was to them at the day, this has got a resin on it to keep it waterproof.
Oh, nice.
And then you've got 5 pouches on either side.
For the clips for the rifle.
For the clips for the rifle, exactly. And the neat thing about this rifle, it's just an end block clip. So this changed us from bolt action,
single shot,
to semi-automatic. And Patton loved this rifle. I can't remember the exact quote, but he said something like this was the greatest invention for warfare, since the horse. So
whenever you hear the ching in the movies, that's these clips
after 8
popping
rounds
out of the gun.
Now the Germans at the time, they had bolt action. So we had 8 shots ready to go, and then king, it would pop out. But you could actually outgun the Germans with the bolt action. And that's what made that thing so loved by the GIs. Heavy, a big old bullet, 30-06.
30-06.
But you get 10 of them here. They'd usually carry an additional 20 clips and 2 bandoliers. And that's what they took in. You had your entrenching tool. The Airborne guys and the Rangers, they would cut the handle.
Cut the handles. I was just going to say.
So it'd be a little bit smaller, but it's just a standard, T-handle shovel. And out here you had your mess kit. And so you get the mess kit, your shovel, and then in here was your rations and your socks.
Can you imagine how many ass chewings those guys got when they first started cutting down handles? When they first started cutting their
pockets on their sleeves.
That's
been a Sergeant Major ass chewing since the 40s at least.
Sergeant Majors, I hate those guys. I just hate them.
Sons of bitches.
Good stuff.
But again, if you look at the kit, it's still that 1910 variant. And with the standard canteen cup. But again, you see wool come back. And
we needed wool in Europe. We
needed wool in Europe, and these were little whoobies. But now one of the things that they didn't have the cargo pockets, just straight trousers. I mean, this is like if you're getting your trousers at Woolworth, it's just a straight man pants at the time. So So again, you had a wool shirt. They wore ties. Remember the old Patton movie where he's jacking them up about not wearing ties? I mean, the tie was still part of the uniform, and you can see it's layered. That you can see a mix between OD number 3, which we would call coyote tan, and OD number 7, which is the more jungle green. You see a lot of that. But they would call this camouflage by horizon, so that you got a lighter shade, a darker shade, and so on the horizon, that would be what would break up the outline. Now this one, this would be an after-war shirt, because this was your honorable discharge. And they call it a ruptured duck. The ruptured duck. So they would issue the guys that, because if you couldn't have civilian clothes over in Europe, because if you were in civilian clothes in the military in Europe, they could shoot you as a spy. So you had to be in your uniform. Now everything that the entire nation was into war production, right? So all the clothiers, they were making uniforms, so that buying civilian clothes once you got back to the States was hard as well. But if you were out of the Army and still in uniform, then they could gash you for being out of uniform, or for impersonating, stolen valor, impersonating a soldier. Exactly. You're not a soldier, right? So this was how they solved that. They put the ruptured duck on. So
and then you could wear
your uniform up until the time that you could get civilian clothes.
Civilian clothes.
Yeah. And so you'll see a lot of these post-war. But the nice thing about it was this was a free train ride. This was a free taxi ride. This was free drinking in any bar.
Good stuff.
And so that's the ruptured duck. But again, just the standard wool shirt. And you'll see that this one actually is the 1938 one. It buttons all the way up and down.
Nice.
So a little bit easier to get in and out of. And this, I gave John Ron, Ranger John Ron, I gave him one of those old 1941 field jackets with the Ranger, lozenge on it. And he said, "Oh, that piece of shit." He goes, "If you could get your hands on one of these, this is the one you wanted." And this was the tanker jacket.
Okay.
And so the tanker jacket for Europe was a lot warmer. And you know how it is. Heat is everything. And so this one here is a repro. It's got a kind of a North Face liner. But they were wool liners back in the day.
We call it turtle fur, but it's basically the insert that we have on our hats and stuff.
Correct. Yeah. And so it's still warm. It's just lighter weight, and you can. They used to have to dry clean these. And so this one you can wash in the washer.
Awesome.
And of course, it's got the. You had 6 Ranger battalions in World War II. This is the first Ranger battalion. That would have been William O. Darby. They trained up in Carrickfergus, Northern Ireland, and then they went to war primarily in North Africa.
Where are we going to go from here?
Let's go to one of the other variants for World War II.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Before we do that, though, we're going to break for another commercial. All right, welcome back. The year is 1944.
Omaha Beach.
Wow, we
June
still
6th.
have this beautiful weapon right here.
We do, which I noticed that you hold every chance you get.
I like to snuggle.
Oh, it is. It's
No,
freedom.
A soldier's weapon becomes an extension of his body. He becomes close to this thing. It's part of his life, and you always keep it within arm's reach.
Exactly.
And the closer it is, the better.
And when I started doing, because when you get out of the military, you want to build the guns you had on active duty, and it's almost prohibitively expensive. But then, so I built all those, and then I started yearning for the older stuff. And that one there.
You have a beautiful collection.
That was my go-to favorite for years. All right, so we're in 1944. We're getting ready to invade France. Open up that second front that the Russians have been telling us, please, 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 drag them off the east. You notice we have the same helmet, the M1. Now, one of the things that the Rangers did, which I thought was freaking way ahead of their time, was if you look at this little white band here, this means I'm an NCO. So if I'm wearing this and I'm on the beach and I'm looking across that sea of human beings, all the carnage, I can't, they didn't have individual radios, but they had whistles and they had your voice. Yeah. But they also had visuals. So this means I'm an NCO. So people will migrate to me because I'm an NCO. Now it's got the Ranger lozenge. It was orange so you could see it. And this got a number 5 in it for 5th Battalion.
5th Battalion.
Yep, so 5th Ranger Battalion would have worn this on the beach. If I was an officer, this would not be a horizontal. It would actually be vertical. So it would be right almost smack dab in the middle of that. And so then you could know where your officer's at, you know where your non-coms are at, and that's how you would control yourself on the beach. Another innovation that they did for Normandy was the protective mask. Now you could either wear this on your hip, or some of the guys would prefer to wear it up here, because again they knew that they were going against the Germans.
Gas masks.
Germans had used gas in World War I, so
yeah.
so they figured, okay, now this is
Rubber.
Exactly.
Because we still don't have plastic yet on the battlefield.
Don't have plastic, and they actually had a cotton one of these, but for in the boat, on the beach, in the surf, they went ahead and they went with the rubberized container. So
added buoyancy.
For the
guys in the
innovation for Normandy itself. Now you still had a lot of guys in the old 1904 marching shoe, and but you started seeing these. And again, this is a different boot, so I'm folding it over. But you had these, and it was again a shoe, and so it only went up to here, and so this was
the rough cut leather.
Rough cut leather out. So again, you see that coming back, and you know, they went from brown to black to spit shines to then back to this. So this is what we wear now.
Funny how when the officers and NCOs swap out, they want to go back to what they had when they were younger.
Oh,
no,
exactly.
that's the truth. There's truth to that. There really
so this is called the service shoe type 1.
Okay.
And you would have seen a lot of this on Omaha Beach. And again, not the this is a later variant. You know, it's the 2 buckle boot. But you know, if you fold it over and just
it would actually that'd be the top of the boot.
This would be the
right
top
there.
of the boot, exactly.
So you're saying this collection, your collection isn't complete?
It is incomplete.
This is
exactly.
insane how much stuff you have, Sergeant Major. This is awesome.
All right, now remember we talked about 1st Ranger Battalion, you know,
Gators,
Darby's
yeah.
guys. They cut these down and had a little shorter legging. This was the standard Army issue right here. So so you can see that it goes quite a bit higher on the calf. It's a pain to get in and out of, and but again it kept you know, mud, rock, dirts out of your you know, snakes, sticks. And so it was a good, and actually the guys in SOG in Vietnam brought some of these back.
Yeah.
And they would wear this in Vietnam.
And we would always fight to get away from having to blouse our boots. We're basically doing it for the same reason,
True.
blousing
Yeah.
the boots and everything. But the more guys started getting away with it because it was cool, you start seeing, like I said, more guys even today going back to running gaiters again. History literally does repeat itself.
And so this is what the guys out of 2nd Ranger Battalion would have worn. I talked to some of the guys out of 5th Ranger Battalion, and they wore jump boots. And even though they were not airborne qualified, they wanted that high top leather,
yeah.
and they were able to get the leather boots. So the guys out of second Bat who went ashore on Omaha and Point to Hawk would have worn these taller leggings. Standard kit still. You got a variant of the old 1910, you know, cartridge belt. And you've got a first aid pouch here, and it would come open. It would just have a Carlisle bandage, and you'd open this thing up like a tin,
yeah.
and there would be a standard bandage.
Which was just
kind of
gauze,
similar to the ones we still carry, just gauze and tails, and you wrap it around. And so that's what they wore. Every guy had one of these.
Very similar to the first aid pouch, modified just a little bit to make it a little bit larger.
Correct.
I mean, not first aid pouch, compass pouch. Yep. Compass pouch.
And so you'd have a compass in there. And again, my kit is not complete because I don't have an old vintage compass yet.
We'll have to work on that. We'll see what I can find for you, Sergeant Major. No, literally, if any of you guys out there have an old vintage compass that this fine gentleman needs, complete this, please. Help me complete it. Now, these are some of my favorite toys right here, the old pineapple.
The old pineapple grenades. And again, those rascally Rangers, you didn't have tape back then. The only tape you had was engineer tape, right?
Yeah.
Or not engineer tape, but the damn electrician's tape.
Yeah.
The black stuff. So you see a lot of the kit would have electrician's tape that would tape down the loose straps and stuff. And then again,
the problem with taping this down is then you got to take the tape off to get to your
exactly.
grenade.
So they use trusty inner tubes. And so you see this, and this one here, some of the guys, since this is not the suspenders for the kit, it's the suspenders for your backpack, your haversack. So they didn't come with the loop. So the guys would take a grenade loop and they'd weave it in there. And so now
Oh,
you
yeah,
got a
that's
grenade
the
pull pin that
off.
you can exactly so that you can get the spoon in, and then to keep it. You'd see the guys with the grenades, and you'd say, "Man, they wouldn't do that for real." And I actually asked a guy that was on Omaha Beach. He said, "Oh no, I had two of them, but they either taped it with a piece of electrician's tape, or they would use parts of an inner tube. This one here is just part of a bicycle inner tube that they would use to tape that thing in place.
That slice of inner tube, we were taught those are called Ranger bands.
Yep.
And basically Ranger bands are nothing more than cut bicycle inner tube or motorcycle inner tube, depending on the size you needed. And they're still used today. They really are. And but this is
And
what it
every
dates back to.
generation, the funny thing is, every generation thinks they're the ones that invented
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Oh no.
But it happened back with the fellows on Omaha Beach. All right, you start to see some of the uniform changes. This, what we would now today call coyote tan, is really olive drab number 3.
Okay.
It was just the shade of olive drab. So you start getting into olive drab number 7, right?
The darker green.
The darker green.
We got
And
cargo
again,
pockets.
and we got cargo pockets again. So this came out in about 1943 as a work uniform, and it has a same color top. And so it looks a lot like the fatigues that you see, post World War II into Korea and Vietnam.
Okay.
And so they had the cargo pockets on here. They're very high up, so they're kind of cumbersome. And but they would use it for anything from rations to you name it, to get a little bit more, because they 3 days I think was what they needed to subsist on. So you'd have about 3 days of rations in here, and you'd have the high pockets here. And this is a herringbone twill. They call it HBT. So it's almost like a blue jean or a denim type material. And so the Rangers actually they would impregnate these things with a chemical to make them impervious to gas. And but it also did not allow them to breathe. So most of the guys got rid of these once they were on there, and they went back to their wool trousers again because they're in Europe. And but you start seeing these come up. And these were a work uniform. So initially you'd have your wool trousers on, you'd put this on top of that wool trouser, you'd have your wool shirt, and you'd put the smock on the outside. I mean, so you're layers deep. And, but this is the first time that you actually see these kind of get used a lot. The field jacket is so again, internal to it, you've got, what's the word I'm looking for? Flannel.
Flannel.
So you've got a
Carhartt and
a
lumberjack
flannel shirt, lumberjack shirt, and gives it just another variation other than the heavy wool. And then on the outside of that is the M1941 field jacket. Now,
what's the paper for?
The paper is that's for gas. So this was the M8 chemical paper of the day.
So it would change color.
It would change color, exactly.
So the reason why they wore it on the sleeves is literally so if the plane goes by and you get droplets, or if it's aerosol blowing across the trenches, World War I, this paper would actually change color. It would show that it had a gas on it.
True, yep. And again, these made it inland, probably made it about 2 or 3 days before they were just shredded
People are like,
and
no
got
gas,
gone. Yeah.
throw it away.
But
you
saw
just hooked on the lapel.
It just hooked over the lapel, exactly. Put your arm through it, and the guys would again the paratroopers wore these as well. And but this was pretty much a Normandy thing, because they figured they were going to try to use everything at their disposal to stop them on the beach.
All right, now this chemical paper that they wore on their sleeves, gents, literally history repeats itself. I wore this same chemical tape wrapped around my arm in Desert Storm, the initial invasion of Kuwait and Iraq, because same thing, the threat was there. So history really does repeat itself. All right,
I guess to close this down,
what else you got?
You got the Ranger lozenge. This was the authorized patch for the Rangers. They didn't like it back in the day because it looked like a Sunoco gasoline station patch.
Sign.
So they called it the Sunoco patch. But this was the authorized Army one, because it had to be either a shield, round, or some geometric shape. And but you also started seeing that's where you started seeing the scrolls.
Awesome.
And but yeah, they generally replaced this one with the scrolls. But now the kids, the modern day guys, they love this one.
Oh,
you start seeing this on hats.
Nobody sees Sunoco anymore either.
Exactly.
So. All right, time for another commercial break. You're gonna love this because I've got another awesome table. You're gonna love this one. This is my favorite one.
That's where they get into the true innovation.
The true innovation.
Birth of the Airborne.
And we'll see you back in a minute. All right, so we're back. It's still 1942, but we're talking about the Airborne now.
We're talking. This is my favorite. I could do a 3-part mini-series just on this table. The innovation was off the charts.
And again, it comes back to necessity is the mother of invention.
Mother of invention.
And technology just leaps and bounds, in wartime.
Plus, I mean, they're under canopy. They're going in for 3 days, so everything that they're carrying has got to be on their body.
Yeah.
And they've got to be able to survive for 3 days. And remember earlier in the earlier video, we talked about the haversack, right?
Yeah.
And so the reason that you see so many guys World War II pictures with just the pistol belt or just the cartridge belt is because they got rid of their haversack. And so the Airborne guys, obviously, they got a parachute on their back.
You can't have
a haversack. So they did have suspenders. These are the 1936 suspenders that go with the pistol belt.
Now you say 1936, so they actually reached back and took older kit.
Well, they always had the 1936 suspenders that to help carry the weight. But if you were wearing a haversack, you know, so again, you bring up a good point. So where is my 1936 suspenders when I have a haversack on?
Yeah.
It's somewhere in the combat trains. It's locked in a footlocker. It's in my rucksack.
Nobody
exactly.
has it.
Yeah. So you don't have it. And so the guys, I'm not carrying extra kit. You know, if my haversack leaves, then I'm just going with the pistol belt. So now what the kids would do with this is they would take the weapons. They had a weapons container, and it was padded on the inside.
That thick felt.
The thick felt. They would cut the thick felt out, and then they would use that to actually pad these straps because there's nothing that's
it just digs right in the shoulders. Add that to the parachute.
And so I always and we went full circle back to this. I mean, we successive models of this had padding in it, but remember, as we would actually
go back to the older,
go back to the old school. This I thought
Ranger
was
suspenders. I think we called them in the
yep, you're
90s,
right.
Yeah.
This was one of my
instead of carrying everything in one pack, they go to smaller pouches on the belt.
Correct, and this is a rigger pouch. So they had access to, the riggers had to sew up their stuff, sew holes in the parachutes and stuff. So they would go to the riggers just like we used to do, and with some crazy ass idea. And what they did was, these are pouches now. So instead of having a belt where I can get 10 of these clips, you've got these pouches here where I can get 4 clips in each, 4 M block clips for my M1 rifle in this pouch. And so now I can carry more of that, a bat belt, if you will, all around my waist.
And we don't know nothing about Batman belts and nothing.
Exactly. He was just trying to look like you. So, but also these would carry the 15-round carbine magazines. So if I have an M1 carbine with a paratrooper folding stock, then I can use this, or I can use my M block clips for my M1 rifle. If you look at this,
5 of those 20. How many round clips are those?
You can get 5.
Get 5. Okay.
Now, if you look at the entrenching tool, that's a big, long. I mean, so some of the guys would chop the handle off, and
that one had the folding spade, unlike the fixed one.
Yeah, and that was actually the replacement for this one. This one came out in 1910. So if you had a 1910, and it was not uncommon to have one guy to have a 1910 spade and the other one to have a 1943 one. And so when the 43s came out, they would actually chop the handles off. If you get a hold of a 1910, the Rangers and the Airborne guys would actually shorten the handles and then re-put them on. So you had a little spade. These tended to break, weren't as tough as the newer ones.
The folding one didn't. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And we kept the folding ones for years.
Yeah.
Afterwards. And this was the kit that we jumped into the 75th anniversary for Normandy. And if I could do a shameless plug.
Go for it.
I jumped with the round canopy parachuting team out of Palatka, Florida. And I tell you, any of you veterans that are out there that are looking for a reason to stay alive, if you're looking for a tribe, the guys in the round canopy parachuting team is a good place. It's a good venue to give you some, what am I saying? Some purpose in your life.
Yeah, camaraderie.
Some purpose back in your life.
Get around a little, the esprit de corps, being around airborne troops again.
Exactly. And if you're not a former airborne trooper, if you're just a civilian off the street that wants to get your living history on, these guys will teach you everything you need to know. So again, the round canopy parachuting team, our chapter happens to be out of Palatka down in Florida. So it's a great, I mean, those are some of the most professional guys that I've ever jumped with. Very safe.
We may have to get a group together and do it again this year.
You know what? I think that would be a
maybe.
perfect episode for the Tactical Rifleman and his crew.
So I think we could probably get our own Tactical Rifleman stick on one of those planes, right?
I think
Got my
we
son,
need to.
he's a dirty, nasty leg. Got Chad, everybody knows Chad, our camera guy, he's a dirty, nasty leg. And you and me, we're just old broken legs.
And I'll bring my son along as well, because he actually graduated from a course a couple weeks ago. I got to do his 6th jump. I got to jump master his 6th jump down in Palatka.
See, that's just awesome. That's just awesome. All right, so
back
before I go
to
down
the
memory lane, that I haven't even had the memory yet, let's go down your memory lane. You actually jumped this kit.
Exactly, I jumped this kit. So again, the standard M1 helmet.
Were you carrying grenades when you
Airborne, yeah, I didn't have them exposed, so I had them inside the bag. But
so cool.
I've got a modern day chin strap on it, because usually it was a leather one. The actual issue wasn't real comfortable with that, so you had one chin strap that held it on your head, and then another neck strap that was. So they just had double protection to keep it from flying off your head. Now you'll remember this. So we've got this was the standard overseas cap worn by the Airborne. And the patch here on the front is actually the glider patch, because there were two types of airborne troops. You had the infantry guys that would go in on a glider. They would initially take off, towed by an airplane. They would cut it loose, and then they would glide in. So it was like the early, trying to make a helicopter.
Yeah, basically.
But this thing just glided in. And so you had the glider and the airborne troops. They would do crazy stuff, like once they hit the drop zone, they would take a piece of their parachute, and they would cut that piece of parachute out, and then they would wrap it around their neck, and they would use it as a
little keffiyeh type thing. Yeah,
exactly, just to soak up sweat, clean your rifle, just the standard stuff that the guys do
with
now.
the rough cloth of the uniforms that you're wearing. Like a lot of pilots they're famous for wearing the silk scarves, because your head's always on a swivel looking for German fighters. Well, the same thing, the infantrymen on the ground, rough, heavy uniforms, that silk scarf from the parachute makes it a little easier to turn your head around, wipe sweat, everything.
Yeah. And this is a period of straps. I mean, from a map bag to your magazines to what have you. So you've got all that straps on your neck. Now so one thing the paratroopers did is that they would take their standard
belt
1936 suspenders, and with their belt. This one here is set up for a Thompson submachine gunner. Now, if you look here, they've got the musette bag. So the musette bag was probably the first cut at a rucksack. And the nice thing about that makes the musette bag different from the haversack is the fact that it just straps onto the existing shoulder straps.
So it doesn't have its own shoulder straps.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, it also in this little pouch here has a shoulder strap that you can actually put a shoulder strap on, and then you can
like
sling
a
it as a
messenger
bag.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can put anything in here. Now, they would have a piece of about 15 to 20 feet of rope, and this is just the old school. They didn't have nylon back in the day, and so it's cotton. And if they get caught in the tree, then they would
lower themselves down.
Exactly.
But once you're on the ground, that doesn't sound like a lot of rope, but everybody could tie their ropes together, and now you've got 200 feet of rope. So it's awesome.
So the nice thing about the musette bag, when you have it on your back, if you're getting into your canopy, you just flip it in front of you, and then you got your belly mounted reserve. Once you get out of your kit, you flip it back over your shoulders,
and you're already ready to go.
You're off and running.
That's awesome.
So it was a neat innovation that those guys came up with, and again, you're talking 3 days of stuff that you need to fight through. Now they had their own first aid pouches.
Yep.
So and you used to see Iron Tits over in the who's the famous paratrooper, 3-star general, went to Korea. He was they called him Iron Tits because he would wear a frag grenade.
Right
Thus
there.
the iron.
Yeah.
And then one of these. And he was an old paratrooper from World War II, and he just he kept that for the rest of his career. And,
generals can get away with stuff like
exactly.
that. Yeah, you can't see me showing up at the A15 conference room with a frag grenade hooked to my shoulder. It's just not going to fly.
Matthew Ridgway.
That's exactly what it was.
Well, these guys also had wrist-mounted compasses, so that land navigation was a big tool for them. So they would
because they were spread out everywhere when
they
they
were
got
spread
on the
out
ground.
everywhere. Yeah,
everywhere.
So they would wear it on their wrist.
Yeah.
And then they were able to navigate.
Look at the size of that thing.
Oh, I know. That thing is huge. But a good piece of kit that kind of set them apart. But other than that, standard, M1911 holster. A lot of times they'd run a piece of tape or a band across that to keep it from flying out.
And we literally carry the exact same load today, except now it's the operators are running Garmin GPSs on their wrists. You still have a sidearm. Matter of fact, a lot of the guys have on the back of their body armor, instead of having a 3-day pack, a lot of the guys are running packs that clip in just like your smaller bag did, so that they can get to it quickly, release it. They can take it off in front of them. And granted, our frag grenades have changed a little bit, but the ropes, we S-roll our 20 feet of tubular nylon, keep it up under the plate in the front of our body armor, so if you need it, you can hook them together. And it's just amazing that literally we didn't make any of this up. We didn't make nothing up. We're not awesome.
It was funny.
This was awesome. This is awesome right here.
And these guys were some of the first to, again, go to the riggers and take these pouches here on their on their waist and sew them onto their sleeves. So that they would have an additional
just like we did.
Pockets, Yep. And again, they would still have these lower pockets. They'd have the upper pockets, and then they would add 2 additional pockets on the sleeves. And generally for stuff like first aid dressings, morphine, syrettes, those kinds of things. Standard either flannel or wool shirt underneath. This was an overgarment.
Yeah.
And it had a belt. Now this one's set up like the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services. And so one thing that made...
Real quick for our viewers, who was the OSS?
The Office of Strategic Services was set up by a crazy fellow by the name of Wild Bill Donovan. Yep. Wild Bill Donovan was a Medal of Honor winner in World War I. And he went to Roosevelt about a week after the war started and said, "Boss, this is going to be different than anything else we've ever faced." And so they had everything from people doing light spying to Ivy League guys to you name it. And it was small groups of GIs that would go in and work with the French and
a lot
the British.
of them had to have language skills ahead of time and everything.
And generally it was an officer, an NCO, and one-year indigenous partners, and they would jump in behind the lines prior to D-Day, and they would blow up infrastructure, communications, all the lines of communication of the enemy, and just disrupt it in the rear prior to the beach landings and the paratroopers, and it was awesome. I mean, they got a great history, and they actually turned into, the uniform guys that were in the OSS became special forces. The civilians that were in the OSS during the war went to be the CIA.
So you see that's why it's kind of a big deal when somebody says OSS to us. It's immediately like, hey, that's literally part of my lineage, but it's cool that it also ties the CIA in. So I technically shouldn't hate all the guys in the CIA. I shouldn't.
Now, the thing that made them unique was they had their patch. Their patch here was their Special Forces wings, and then they also had the British jump wings that they wore, and they wore that on their right sleeve, much like the British did. And so a lot of times you'll see the pictures of the guys that went in. We generally, the U.S. wore our unit patch on the left shoulder, and then our American flag on the right shoulder. Yeah. These guys did it differently. They had the American flag on their left shoulder because their unit patch was on the right shoulder. Yeah. So when you see a uniform like this that's set up for the OSS, it'll be different than the rest of the crew. But they wore the M1942 jumpsuit. This was like the iconic uniform that got us way into the 20th century, even the 21st century. When they jumped into Africa initially, into North Africa, their pockets blew because they had so much stuff in them that they blew out their pockets, their leg pockets. So they had the riggers again, go back to the rigger shop, and they actually sewed, reinforced all the pockets. They reinforced the elbows. So again, that's it took us a while to get around back to that, but now everything that we own has got
reinforced
knees,
everything, yeah.
elbows. So really an iconic uniform. It's one of my favorites, and it in the old coyote tan or the olive drab number 3. They had suspenders because you had
the same thing. These pockets were full to the gills too.
These were full to the gills. Another thing that they found out in North Africa, that these leg pockets would blow. Plus you're getting chafed because of all the stuff that you had in there. So they actually came up with leg ties, so they could actually tie the pockets down and keep them
so
from
it wouldn't float on and rub you raw. Yeah.
Knee pads as well, as you can see. This one's already got showing some wear.
Did you hit the ground a little hard wearing this?
Well, I was probably crawling. It probably wouldn't have been PLF, yeah. And suspenders, because trying to keep heavy trousers with pockets full of, it's better to get that stuff off your waist and put it up on your shoulders. So really an awesome uniform for its day.
And that's before you get to everything else they strap to them.
Oh yeah, exactly. You got the protective mask. These guys were some guys, and the guys that would wear it on their chests, they were probably that's how they wore it in World War I. And they had the big protective
force
mask
of
up
habit.
here. The paratroopers though, they would put it on their leg, much like we still wear today. So, but again, the hard rubber, the rubber to keep it waterproofed for the Normandy beachhead. They always had an M3 fighting knife. Most of these guys, since they had so much on their belt already, they would take this fighting knife and then they would put it on.
I got a lot of fans of knives on this channel, so show them what the M3 looks like, because they're going to say, oh, it's a K-bar.
Not a K-bar. It's the standard M7 blade, basically, like we had up into the 80s, and prior to the new bayonet coming out. But this is it was called the M3 Commando knife. It came in a leather sheath. Later on, they had like that the plastic, the early plastic models. But they would tie this, using the little strap, GP strap. They would tie that to their boot.
Yeah, this would go up above the calf, and then that would go down around the boot. Yeah,
exactly.
So you already had a knife accessible, so you could cut your parachute away if you're hung up in the trees, stuff like that. Being towed by the airplane, you had a knife within reach.
And then, just like today, every jump master had to have a knife that was easily accessible. Now, the other ankle, they'd have this mine, and it's a little mine. It's got a cap well here that you can, like we were talking about earlier.
Universal cap well.
Universal cap well. You can detonate it by either blasting cap and time fuse or
the electric caps. Either way, if you need command detonated.
So you'd have
now,
one of
why
these.
did it have leg straps on it?
Because they would tie that to their other legs. You'd have a knife on one leg and this mine on the other. So anywhere that you could put this.
Anywhere you could put space. You guys get that? Literally, all this had to go in by one round parachute. So literally, you run out of real estate on your body. You've got pockets sewn here, everything. So, I don't know, let's just strap an explosive mine to our calf. That's what we need. But literally, once you hit the ground, there are times where you need larger quantities of explosives, and you could stack those things. You
could stack them, you could daisy chain them, you could blow treads on tanks. I mean,
all kinds of fun stuff.
It was just your standard.
If everybody had one, and you had 200 paratroopers, that's 200 blocks of explosives.
Exactly.
Sexy stuff.
Now this is a great innovation for its day, and was the standard boot for years.
Standard boot for my entire career, except it was black.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. So it was in the russet brown of the day, and it's hard leather. It actually, if you look at the boots generally have about a 10-inch. This has got 11 or 12 inches up on your ankle, so just below the calf. And again, this thick leather. They were a booger to break in. I mean, they were horrible on your feet. But once you had them broken in,
once it was sized to you.
Exactly. Yeah. And the leather gets soft, and it's like wearing a pair of tennis shoes. But this was the standard boot.
We would boil literally the garbage can filled with boiling water, soak the boots, and then once the water is boiling again, you would put them back onto your feet, literally scalding, and you had to walk around, let them dry on your feet, but the leather would shrink and mold to your feet, and they were no longer size 12s, they were size Carl Erickson boots.
Exactly,
and it was just it's a way to speed up the break-in process.
Yeah, I think I used Needs foot oil on this, shoe grease. I stood in the pool until they were totally soaked, and then I would cut the
So
grass.
I didn't have to boil my feet.
They were all different techniques,
Yeah,
exactly, whatever worked. And so I would cut the grass. I cut the grass in these for about 2 months, once a week, every for 2 months to break them in.
Are you talking about breaking in this actual pair?
This actual pair,
You no joke jumped those boots in the Normandy.
That was them,
so
and I didn't want to
awesome,
get
dude.
blistered up.
Not bad. The guys
I'm out there like a retard, mowing the grass.
All right.
All right, you got 6 Thompson magazines.
Which means you have to have a
Thompson
Thompson, which weighs as much as a M249, by the way.
Crazy.
Solid, heavy wood. We got to shoot this, by the way.
Yes.
We've so got
in fact,
to shoot
what
this.
I was thinking too, while we're on break, is that I've got to bring this stuff up to your place.
Without a doubt.
And then we dress in it, and because when I started,
And we could go
stuff,
to like the bank and stuff wearing all this.
Perfect.
Go shopping.
I like the way you think. Yeah. Well, when I first started collecting all this stuff, I would actually put it on and then try to shoot the weapon, like our forefathers did. On the range, exactly.
Not at the bank.
You get a whole new respect for a guy that had to carry and manipulate this weapon. And if it jams and you're unable to get rid of that jam, you have to go to your backup.
How do you do that? I can't.
You either drop or hold like that. That's the only way I was able to do it, because you don't want to drop it.
Can't drop it. So now you got to get good with one-handed shooting.
Or you sling it, exactly. But that thing is a dream to shoot as well. 10-inch barrel.
This is just beautiful, guys. We're gonna go to his next block of gear, but before we do, we're gonna break again for a commercial. All right, so it's 1943, and we're going to Normandy.
We're gonna start in Normandy, exactly.
And I got my whoopee back.
Got your favorite, your girl.
Still clear, all right.
All right, so in 1943 was the Army's first attempt at camouflage. And what you got here, they call it the duck hunter pattern. So it's an M1943 fatigue uniform, the herringbone twill, just like the olive green one. But this was their first fledgling camouflage pattern. Now the reason that this didn't get a lot of play during the war, because it went to the Pacific as well, but why it didn't get a lot of play in Europe was because the Germans were the masters of camouflage. So the SS guys, they had different camouflage smocks. So they had one armored infantry regiment that went ashore at Normandy, and we fired ourselves up. It was nothing but
because they knew that the only people on the battlefield that had camouflage were the Germans.
Exactly. So they didn't get the word. So they soon got the guys out of this camouflage uniform, and they sent it to the Pacific, and the Marines wore it. They had their own version of it. The Alamo Scouts wore it in the Pacific, and so it was actually a very popular camouflage pattern after the war. Probably more popular after the war than it was, because they called it the duck hunter pattern. You had a bunch of catalogs that sold it in the States, and everybody would...
I still have rednecks that wear it in Kentucky to this day.
Our boys going into Vietnam in the early days wore the duck hunter camouflage as well. So our advisors in Vietnam. Now, if you look at this, this is actually the same belt and suspenders, but it's in the olive green number 7.
Number 7, so it's
olive
darker.
Number 7, so it's darker. And
Same theater, Europe. Why'd they decide to go darker with it?
Actually, it was just, I think it was probably, they were just learning from the war. The coyote tan was
we needed
was
to
good,
go a little darker.
They went a little bit darker. A lot of these, and I've heard differing stories. I heard that this was initially made for the Pacific Theater as well, with more green in the jungle. But we
and the tans were the guys were just coming back from Africa, so that's the gear they had.
Yeah.
Right.
So a lot of this went to the Pacific Theater, and we stayed pretty much, olive drab number 7 until we finally broke with the ERDL camouflage.
And we went the BDU pattern.
The BDU pattern, exactly. So, but again, standard trousers. They had the leg pockets,
Big
the
cargo
cargo
pockets.
pockets on the side, and so it was a good uniform. But again, didn't get much play. That was our initial attempt at camouflage. Now, 1943 rolls around. You had the M42, paratrooper outfit, and this was the replacement for that. So this uniform that we just saw. And then remember the old wool trousers and the wool shirt. As they looked at what the paratroopers are doing with the cargo pockets up, the chest pockets and the lower pockets, they actually came out with this. And this still today remains the standard field jacket. And again, you wear a wool shirt or a flannel shirt underneath, and as your actual uniform, and then this was the over. Now here's a little thing. This was the Airborne Command from World War II, but if you fast forward into the 50s, this is what the original Special Forces guys wore, because there was no Special Forces patch, so they went back to the Airborne Command patch, and they wore this until they created the Arrowhead patch. But a good uniform. Again, we're going from our browns to our greens. It was in OG number 7. We're still wearing the standard M1 helmet, and the pants for this uniform didn't have pockets. So what did the Airborne guys do?
We went and sewed them on.
They had the riggers sew on cargo pockets and with tie-down straps.
Now the color's close, but it's a lot stiffer, sturdier.
Exactly, and I think it was anything that the riggers could find. So it could be anything from shelter half materials to the
Tops
top of a
of
deuce
Jeeps
and a
and
half.
trucks,
Exactly, yep. So it.
And we do the same thing. We do today, and it's every generation. You can imagine how many ass chewings they got from the sergeant majors back then for being out of uniform.
Well, and these this uniform as it is stayed with us into the 90s, to be honest with you, and it became the standard field pants and the field jacket.
OG 107s.
And again, you see, and this was our transition right here to olive green, number 7. So
awesome. All right, this is cool. Before we go to our next generation of change here, we're gonna let YouTube smack you right in the face with another commercial. We'll see you guys just a second. All right, welcome back. Hey, it's 1951 and we are in Korea. My blaster's getting smaller. Now this one was in the other conflicts also.
Exactly. Well, and remember we were talking earlier, you tend to go fight the next war with the equipment from the last
previous
war. And so there's that to contend with, but also the fact that we were the best fighting force the world had ever seen after we defeated Nazi Germany and Japan. 5 years later, when we go into Korea, the North Korean army with pitchforks and Russian tanks chases us all the way down to the Pusan perimeter. So that's how fast your skills fade. And this particular weapon right here is the M1 carbine, and it replaced the .45 caliber pistol for people who were Jeep drivers or clerks or what have you, because they were having trouble with shooting that sidearm accurately. So this was a nice little rifle. And came in 30 caliber during World War II. It had a 15-round magazine, but they upgunned it in Korea to a 30-round magazine. So it's a 30 caliber carbine pistol round, basically.
We say pistol round literally because as I grew up loving these guns and everything. This was awesome. This was what was in all the movies. But I've shot groundhogs and everything else, and it's just not it's an underpowered, very underpowered rifle round.
And that's why the guys didn't care for it. But they loved it because of the weight.
Yeah,
it was
of course.
So lightweight. That was kind of the go. Now, if you notice, the boots have changed. So we had initially, remember, we had the basic
with gaiters
shoe with gaiters, exactly, the service shoe type 2. Well, they went with these are the 2-buckle boots. So basically all they did is they just sewed a nice little leather upper on that and just sewed a gaiter to it, exactly. And so this was the boot that these actually came out in probably late 44, early 45, but it was the boot that we initially took to Korea in 50, 51.
Awesome.
As you see, we're back to our olive greens, or our olive drab number 7. Some of the innovations here and this is the 1945 web gear. So they're getting a little smarter.
Yeah.
They've got actually a rucksack now that hooks on to the existing web gear.
Okay.
And so you can just undo this strap, and then the rucksack comes away.
If you don't need it.
If you don't need it, and then you keep your straps. So they had a spot, and this was actually kind of modeled after the Marines World War II kit, but you can have your poncho.
This is actually a
poncho
shelter
liner, your
half,
shelter
though, isn't
half, exactly. So all your sleeping stuff can go along here on the outside. You've got your entrenching tool, which is your best friend.
A shelter half is basically half of a tent. You've got 3 little pole sections, a string, 1 string, and a half of a tent. And you and your partner would take it, it snaps together. He takes his string and his pole at one end. I take my string, my pole at the other. We have a couple stakes, and together
we form a tent.
We have a little itty bitty tent, about half the size of this table.
Exactly, just enough to get your body in and maybe do some
out of the
spooning.
snow.
Yeah, exactly. All right, and it's got a second bag down here. So there's actually this bag here for
In the center, yep.
on the top for clothes, socks, foot powder, your eating utensils, and then this lower one here for any of your other kit for chow so it really was kind of a neat rig, and this is the ones you see on all the old Green Army men.
Oh yeah,
Green
exactly.
plastic
Yeah,
Army
the
men.
little plastic Army
Yep.
men, they've all got that. That's hilarious.
You got the standard. So this is where we start getting innovation for different weapons, right? The magazine pouch. So you've got your 30-round magazines now that replace the 20-round or the 15-round magazines. So you've got a magazine pouch that is not rigger made, but actually
you didn't have to go make a custom-made one, all right?
And then you've got your grenade pouch that'll take 3 pineapple grenades,
3 smoke
or
grenades.
3 smoke grenades, or 2 pineapple, 1 smoke, and that's right on your leg. So it had a little strap on it. This one's been cut off that you can tie to your leg. And
this was my first pouch that I had when I was a kid.
Is that right?
It said frag grenade pouch in the Army Surplus store, and I just thought it was the coolest. Pretty well had decided I was going to be a Green Beret in junior high school, and the rest is history. Train wreck history, but it's still history.
Now with this carbine, one of the ways that you can tell if it's a Korean War vintage or if it's an old World War II is that they added this bayonet lug, so it would fit a bayonet.
Okay.
Because you got issued the carbine in World War II, didn't have a bayonet lug, so you got that old M3 fighting knife.
Yeah.
And so they actually put this lug on here, and then that allowed you to actually mount
the bayonet.
an actual bayonet.
So that's
on it.
one way to tell it apart. See, I did not know that. That's awesome.
So yeah, always look for the bayonet lug, and that'll tell you what time frame.
What generation it was. Okay.
Now they were wearing initially when they first went to Korea the same the M19 42 uniform.
Yeah.
Olive green. This is the olive green one. They had the camouflage pattern, and so they had these initially, the herringbone twill. They actually went to a newer uniform in 1951 that we'll see in the next video. And this is the first time that you start seeing helmet covers. So on your M1, some of the guys would use sandbags, but then they actually had, no kidding, issue green helmet covers that you could put your
holes
your
to
foliage
stick your branches, leaves, things like that.
And we kept with these kind of covers different camouflage patterns, to when you and I first
modern
came
day.
in.
Yeah.
Now a lot of people look at this and they say this is a Marine Corps hat. No, this is an Army issue. It was with the 1942 uniform, the herringbone twill, that the Marines copied it from us. So they went. You had a few of these in Korea, and then they went to the old 1951 patrol caps when they came out with the newer uniforms, when they replaced these.
Did not know. I didn't know that either. Awesome. Can you believe we're already an hour into this video and Sergeant Major Lamb has got lots more generations of change for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop right now, all right? And then we're going to take all the rest of them and we're going to make it into a part 2 in this video series. It'll come out a couple weeks later. We've got a special ending at the end of it. Sergeant Major Rick Lamb's going to go over his time in Mogadishu. Y'all have seen the video, Black Hawk Down. That's right, he was a man that was there. And he's got all his gear from that up. So anyways, the end of part 1. Be sure to check out part 2 in a couple of weeks. Y'all take care and shoot straight. If you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter so you don't miss out on anything.